So let's give Sally a massive round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, Sally Lawson.
Thank you, Rob.
The stage is yours. The clicker is over there, that big thing.
Crikey, this is big. I've never seen one this big before. Wow, okay.
That's what they all say when I'm on the stage. I will see you later.
Okay, enough of the jokes. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Rob. That was fantastic. You know, a little bit about me. My name is Sally Lawson. I've been in the game for rather a long time. It's actually 20 years, Rob. It's now 20 this year, so it's been longer than I care to remember. Some people say to me, you must have been 5 when you started, which is always nice. I was actually 18 when I started my letting agency, and I'm going to go a little bit back in a moment and tell you a little bit how I got into lettings, but I want to tell you a little bit about where we are now. We are actually one of the largest UK independent letting agencies, and we've been going for 20 years, and in that time we've let over 5,000 properties. So have a think about that. 5,000 tenants, 5,000 landlords. Have a think how many leaky taps, toilets, contract renewals, vacates, neighbour disputes, dogs weeing on next door's garden, all that sort of thing. You get the picture? So we've been rather busy. So anyway, where's the slides? Oh, there we are. So a little bit about how I started. I wasn't born with what you might call a silver spoon. I actually grew up in rather dismal environments, caravans and things like this. This isn't the actual one. Mine was actually half the size of this one. But when I was doing this presentation, and Rob said, I want a little bit more, I want to know a bit about you. So I went back to the caravan site where I used to live when I was little, and I tried to find the original caravan, but unfortunately it's gone. It's obviously fallen apart and been taken to the scrap heap in the sky. But this one was there. But you see at the end there, when you get to the door, mine was about that size. So it's about half the size of that. Unfortunately, my mother passed away, and I was put into foster care at the age of 11. And that was quite a big change for me, but it was actually quite a positive change because it put me into a normal 2-bed semi as opposed to a caravan and put me into a normal environment. And things were going quite well for a while. But left home at 16 and decided to get a job. And I can remember, can you all remember your first interview? You know, when you get all suited and booted. You've got your nice suit on, you polish your shoes. I was living in a place called Armitage. Anybody heard of the Armitage Shanks, the toilets? Yes, I was living, toilets come over the wall there. It's really quite cool, actually. You never buy a toilet in Armitage Shanks. And I went to get this interview in Birmingham, the big city of Birmingham, so I was really quite nervous. And went for the interview. It's for a sales job, selling overseas property, timeshare. And I was doing quite well, and at the end of it, he said, congratulations, I'd like to give you the job. I said, oh, fantastic, that's brilliant, thank you. I said, what's the salary? He said, commission only. But I took it, I did it, and did reasonably well at it. I was 16 at the time. Time moved on, sold quite a few bits of timeshare. This was before it was sort of dodgy, before it sort of got the bad reputation. At the time, it was still pretty cool, holiday co-ownership and that sort of thing. And was doing reasonably well. I was earning quite a lot of money. I was actually a 40% taxpayer at the age of 16. Started to bankroll, started to pack a load of money in my little drawer back in my little flat, and decided that I thought it was time to buy. Does anybody remember Margaret Thatcher? Yeah? Do you remember when she used to say, you've got to get your foot on the ladder, you've got to buy property? Does anybody remember that? It wasn't just me, was it? And I was there. I was 17 thinking, I've got to buy a property. I've got to get my foot on the ladder. If I don't get my foot on the ladder, I'm never going to be able to. So anyway, one of the girls at work says to me, oh, I've got a flat for sale. Remember, I'm working in Birmingham. She says to me, I've got a flat for sale. I says, oh, where is it? And she says, oh, just up the road from here. I said, oh, fantastic, I'll come and have a look. So off we got in her car and we went up the Hagley Road, if anybody knows Birmingham, which is the main road going out of Birmingham. We turned left a little bit and had a look around the flat. I'm not kidding you, this flat, they used to say compact and bijou. It was the size of a shoebox. You walked in through the door here and you were into the lounge. And then you turned right, there were some folding doors and there was the bed. There was the shower, and here was the kitchen sink and the toilet, the kitchen sink and the cooker. But I loved it, absolutely loved it. And she wanted £27,000 for it. And I thought, God, wow, that's amazing. I'll have it. So off we toddled a little bit later, and I said, right, I'll go and get a mortgage. And I went into somewhere called Prudential Estate Agents. Anybody remember them? and wandered in. There I was, really excited at the age of 17, and said, I want to buy a flat. They goes, oh, certainly, madam, come on in, take a seat. So I sat there, started going through the details, date of birth, 29/9/71, started going through these bits and bobs and whatever. And she said, I beg your pardon? I said, oh, 29/9/71. She goes, that makes you 17. Oh, yeah. She goes, you can't have a mortgage at 17. I said, but it's really nice. I love the flat and I've got the money and all the rest, like you do. And she said, no, I'm sorry, we can't do it. I said, oh, come on, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way you can get with this flat. And she says, well, no, I can't think of one. I said, well, look, I'm 18 in about 2 weeks' time. I said, could I perhaps do all the paperwork now and then come back in 2 weeks' time and we can sign it then when I'm 18? And she said, I don't know. So off she went. She went to the manager out the back, came back and said, yeah, okay, we can do that. I thought, great. So there we are, 29th of September, when I was 18, on the 29th of September, I went in, signed all the papers for my first flat, 2 weeks later completed. I was now the proud owner of a lovely, compact and bijou flat. Where? Dudley. Oh, God. Dudley. I thought I'd bought a flat in Birmingham. But I'd actually bought a flat in Dudley. And not only Dudley, it was Netherton Dudley. And if anybody knows Netherton Dudley, it's a bit of a strange location. So there we are. I've got the keys to my flat in Dudley. First of all, I could not find it for love nor money because I was convinced I bought this place in Birmingham. But eventually I found it. And if you look at the picture, it's just the one to the top left there. That was my first little flat there. There's actually 4 on the top floor and 4 on the bottom floor, so they're not as big as they look. They do look rather large, don't they? Anyway, so there I was, moving my bits and bobs into my flat. And I thought, well, you know, it's mine. It may be in the middle of nowhere in a strange place. With your talk like this, because I'm from Dudley. But there we are. I've got a flat, you know. And you know when you buy your first home and you've got that feeling of, it's mine. You know, that feeling. You can't beat it, can you? It's mine. And then I had a knock at the door. I thought, oh, neighbour, coming to say hello. So I opened the door, and I would never have believed it. There was this girl standing there with one eye going this way, one eye going that way, a little miniskirt like this, big blue legs going, all right, my name's Donna. I said, oh my God, it was Donna the prostitute. And she lived in that one on the right there. And she wanted to be my best friend. God, did I want to get out of there. So I became what you might call an accidental landlord, because I thought, I am not living in this place. I have got to get out of here. As soon as I'd moved in, it was dreadful, because she was banging on my door, waiting for me outside, everything. It was horrendous. So what we did is I thought, right, I'm going to let it out. I'll phone a letting agent. And this was 1989. There wasn't many letting agents around at that time. But I got one. The closest one was in Birmingham. And I shan't mention their name, but they were a strange company. But anyway, I called them out, and out this guy came. Must have been mid-40s, very well presented, quite respectable, lovely chap. And he spent ages looking around my flat, as you can imagine, doing all the tour, as they do. And he's going, oh, yeah, nice kitchen. Yeah, nice mattress. And I said, you've got a really cool job you have, haven't you? And he says, well, you know, it's quite good. I said, letting it. I said, do you get to go around everybody's house and look at all their stuff? He went, yeah. And I said, I said, have you got any jobs going at your place? He went, yeah. I said, cool, when can I start? So anyway, I ended up going to Birmingham and I ended up working for this letting agent. And you know when you go into, I don't know if you've ever been into, sometimes insurance companies have, you know those big counters they have that go from side to side? Well, I walked in this letting agent and it was a massive, massive place. But it had a huge counter that went right from one side to the other, and I thought, well, that's not very friendly, is it? Anyway, never mind, started working there. And it was one of those places, I don't know if you remember it, where they used to pay to have a list. Do you remember they used to have to pay to get a list? Anybody remember that? No? Bit of a while ago. It's outlawed now, you can't do it anymore, but they used to charge you 27 quid or something like that to actually have a list of all the properties available, which you're not allowed to do anymore. And they did a bit of property management on the side. And I can remember about 3 hours in to my day, this landlord came in. Oh, he was absolutely livid. Angriest person I think I've ever seen. Even since then, it was the angriest person I've ever seen. He came in and he was like, I want my rent. And I was like, oh. And you know, you just stand there and you just, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? So I said, I'll just get the manager for you. And I ran off around the back and got the manager and wheeled him out and was sort of like then hiding behind the desk like this, waiting for him to sort him out. But this was a regular occurrence all the time. Landlords were coming in, chasing their rent, wanting their deposit back. Why has my property been empty? And it was an awful place to work. Absolutely awful. But I thought, you know, if this was done properly, this would be a good business. So I went back to my then boyfriend at the time, David, and I said, David, and all the women will relate to this now. I said, I've got this great idea. And he went, oh yeah? I said, I think I should set up a letting agency. Yeah, crap idea, it'll never work. So I thought, oh, sod him, I'll do it anyway. So I did. Got a job in a curtain shop, making and selling curtains part-time, and set up a letting agency in my spare time, which all went pretty well, no problems there. We first got our first little office above a bike shop and progressed on and sort of moved on from that. But I had to have a little conversation with my boss before I left. My boss was one of these people that believed in breaking your kneecaps if you set up in competition with him. And this was not a rumour. I'd seen people on crutches, so I was really concerned about this. So I had to go into my boss and I said, look, you know, I'm ever so sorry, but I'm going to leave. And he went, oh, why is that? And I said, well, I've got a job for another company, which I thought that was the best excuse, just say you're going to work somewhere else. And he said, oh, who's that? I thought, oh, bugger, I haven't thought of that. I hadn't got an answer for that. So you know when you sit there for inspiration and you're looking around the room and you're looking for pictures or a name or something, anything at all to give you some inspiration. And at the time I was dating a guy called David Lawson. So I said, Lawson's? I'm going to go and work for Lawson's. And he went, oh, Lawson's, they've been going for years, haven't they? I went, yeah, that's right, yeah, Lawson's. And that was it. That's how Lawson's became Lawson's. The problem is, I had to marry the guy to get the name. So anyway, a few years on, husband's gone, I got the company, and I got to keep the name. So there we are. This is Lawson's. We started it in 1990. It's been trading now for 20 years. And as I said, we've done over 5,000 properties in that time, £1.1 billion worth of properties. We've bought over 450 properties for clients in that time as well. So we've been exceptionally busy. You can see there the management team. That's myself. Karen is in the room somewhere, Tony, Steve and Joe. But there's another 11 people in the building. So it's quite a large concern. And we're now franchising all across the UK, so we're very busy. A little bit of my extra journey that came along is I started to use the income and the leads that were generated from the letting agency to actually start buying properties. So although I may have started out as an accidental landlord, just like a lot of people in this room probably started out, I then thought, you know, there's actually a bit of sense in this. I was helping all these other people buy properties and rent their properties, and I thought, why not do a bit myself? So I started buying. I don't know if there's a pointer on here, but the top left one was my first one, and it goes round in sort of a circle. And then I started doing a bit of property trading and using the leads from being a letting agency. Because, of course, as a letting agency, people come in and they say, oh, you know, my flat's not renting. Do you know anybody that would buy it? And I go, oh, I think I could find somebody for you. And we go and help them out. Then we started doing a bit of deal flipping, which I think Rob's spoken about over the last couple of days. The one there at the bottom I bought for 21,000, spent 3 on it and rented it and sold it for 33, so made £6,000 in a few weeks. This one here bought and sold same day. The one in the middle is a former hotel, which is converted, which we were actually letting for a landlord. And he just couldn't make the figures stack because he'd overgeared himself on it. So I bought it off him and I've owned that ever since. So that's done quite well there, really. But then I used all the properties there, and there's a few more as well on top of that one, and actually used that to buy my little toys. Because at the end of the day, why do we invest in property? We don't invest in property because we want the pain of dealing with landlords and tenants. We do it because we want some nice stuff, don't we? Would you agree? We want the pleasure, don't we? So here I started buying a little cottage in Wales, villa in Spain, little place down there in the Cotswolds by Badminton, and that's my car down there. We call that the Batmobile. It's a bit like a bit of a monster. But anyway, that's why I'm not here to talk to you today. I want to tell you a little bit about lettings. How can you make your life easier? Now, one of the problems with buying all these properties and taking all these options out on properties is that you have to deal with the dreaded tenants. Is that right? Anybody here actually have property already? I'm sure most of you do. Hands up if you actually have property now. That's most of you, it's good. Now put your hands up if you actually use a letting agent. About half of you. Interesting. Okay, well over the years, over 20 years of dealing with all these tenants and all these sort of things, there's certain things that come out that can make your life a lot easier. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. What can you do to make your life better with your tenants? Okay. Number 1. Voids. Anybody ever had trouble with voids? Yes? Aren't they painful? You know, you've gone to all that effort, you've done the property out, you've done everything you need to, and then the thing won't let. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever put it with an agent and then wondered, what are they doing? Do you understand this? Yeah, makes sense? Voids can be hugely costly. And I bet a lot of you, before you bought your first property, did you ever have that thought process, what if it doesn't rent? Did you ever think that? Because if it doesn't rent, the whole concept of buying properties let actually falls apart, doesn't it? But there's certain things you can do. One thing that I think is really, really key when it comes to voids is do your research now. And you're doing exactly the right thing by being here today and listening to people like Rob and all these people speak, because you're doing your research and you're learning what to buy and where to buy. That is so, so important. Like me buying my little flat in Austin House next to Donna the prostitute was not a good move, was it? And just the same way, lots of landlords will go out there and buy properties because they've got a good deal on it. But you have to ask yourself the question, will it rent? If it won't rent and you're buying it to let, what is the point? One of the biggest areas of people that get this wrong is builders. Builders will buy a property because they can see that they'll make money on the sell. They can spend so much money on it and they'll make capital appreciation on it. But then they'll come into me and they'll say, I've bought it to rent. And I say, well, have you bought it to sell or have you bought it to rent? They say, we've bought it to sell. We say, you've bought it in the middle of prostitute land. You're not going to rent that out. But I can make some money when I sell it. Well, sell it then. It sounds common sense. But if you buy something to rent, make sure it'll rent out. But there's lots of other things you can do as well. Have a think about your target market. If you're going to rent to students, have a think about the location of students. Don't buy a student house and try and convert it into a professional let so that you can actually rent it to a family, because you've bought in the wrong location. So try and buy in the right location for the market that you're looking to achieve. Secondly, this is one that we get really, really frustrated with as letting agents, is unacceptable sort of rental levels. We go out and we're asked to value a property, and quite often a landlord will say, well, that's not enough. My mortgage is such and such, I need 650. I say, well, it's only really worth 550, but I need 650. Does it really matter what your mortgage is to the tenant? Of course not. So what is the market rent? Also, what a lot of people do wrong is they'll get themselves on Rightmove and they'll say, what's the rent on this particular type of property? And they'll do highest first. They'll see somebody's got a 650 and they'll think that's the price they're going to get for it. But is it? Because if you actually start looking down the list, you'll see there's some on there for 450. And what does that mean to your rental value? If you've got some at 450 and some at 650, are you really going to get 650? Of course you're not. So be honest with yourselves. What is the achievable rent? Another big one here is presentation. I'll tell you a little story. We had a landlord once, a landlord appointment I went on years ago. And the guy was living in South Africa. Lovely chap, him and his wife. They'd come over from South Africa and they'd had this property rented for about 5 or 6 years through another letting agent. And they got quite disgruntled because every year they were just getting worse and worse tenants. And it got to the point where the only people they could let it to was asylum seekers. And so they'd got messed off with this letting agent and called me out. So I turned up. Do you ever look at repossessions, any of you? You know that feeling when you walk up to the door and you think, oh God, this is going to be bad. It was one of those. I pulled up, you could see sheets hanging from the windows, and was walking towards the door, and as you put your foot through, you get this smell that just knocks you back, and you think, oh no, vile. And you walk in, and you've got this very dodgy, dirty, mottled carpet. Walk through in the kitchen, and the kitchen was lovely once. But now, God, doors were hanging off, the worktops were scratched, awful. Different coloured carpets in different rooms, different coloured walls as you're walking through. And then he says, let's have a look upstairs. As I was walking up the stairs like this, just cast my eye, there was something, a flash of pink. I thought, what's that? And there was like a hall window on the stairway. This UPVC window had been gloss painted pink. I thought, oh dear. Walked up, and at this point I'm thinking there's just no way we're taking this on. Anyway, I get upstairs. I thought I've got to have a look round now because I'm just curious now. You just really want to see what's going on. So I walked into the bathroom and I just went, stop! I just couldn't see anymore. They had a blue bath, a green sink, and a pink toilet. And I'm not kidding you, the tiles were stuck on with blue tack where they'd fallen off. And I just thought, I said, look, I'll be honest with you. There is absolutely no way we or any other letting agent is going to rent this. And he said, it was immaculate when I left it 6 years ago. It's just gone downhill. The agent hasn't told me anything about this, and all he keeps doing is putting asylum seekers in. I said, well, nobody else will have it. You've got to do something to it. He said, what's the point? They keep trashing it. Same old, same old. What's the point? They keep trashing it. I said, they keep trashing it because it's trashed. Does that make sense? The worst condition your properties are in at the start, I can guarantee you they'll be 10 times worse at the end. The only way to get tenants to look after properties is to give them something to look after. You know, give them something to take pride in. If you've got a good quality house at the beginning, they'll look after it to the end. I'm not saying you've got to put, Harrods furniture in there. But it's got to be clean, it's got to be tidy, it's got to be neutral. Presentation is absolutely key, else you will end up getting the wrong type of tenants. Give an example. If you have to put on the inventory, marked, when they move out, how marked is marked? So if it's got a little mark here, you might say carpet marked, just by the door. But if they move out and this is marked, how can you tell? Okay, you might have taken a photograph, but really, how can you really tell marked is marked? They just get worse. So you've got to be very, very careful. Okay, marketing. How many of you do your own marketing, just to give me an idea? And how many of you use agents? Okay, it's about 50-50 again. Okay, marketing. This is so, so important. Really do your research here. I was working with a guy recently who got about 500 properties, and his marketing had stood still. Now, we all know about the internet, yeah? It's changed a bit, hasn't it? Over a few years ago, most of our advertising used to be newspaper. People would come to us because we put nice photographs in the newspaper. Do tenants really buy the newspaper anymore? Of course they don't. They look on the internet. It's fast, it's immediate, it's there immediately, it's straight away, it's fresh, it's new. They don't need to go to the newspaper anymore. But this guy was still advertising in the newspapers. And he said, I don't understand it, Sally. He said, all I get is DSS. I said, well, they're the only people reading the paper. He went, oh. We did some research, and the actual split. Anybody who's seen me in the YPN magazine this month, I've actually put it in there. It was 85% of our inquiries came from the newspaper 5 years ago, and now 85% of our inquiries come from the internet. So over that 5 years, it has completely turned around. So what can you do to make your adverts stand out? Well, one thing you can do is make sure there's photographs. You know when you're looking to buy a property for sale, do you really sit there and read all the descriptions? And yet, how many properties do you see don't have full colour, excellently taken photographs? And then they'll say, well, why is my property not letting? Now, if you've put it on with an agent and you want them to market your property for you, how can you choose whether that agent is any good or not at marketing? What would you do? What do you think is the correct thing to do? Yeah, get on Rightmove, have a look. You know, if you go onto their adverts and they've got 20 properties and there's only one photograph on those 20 properties, do you think they're going to do a good job of your property? Of course not. Move swiftly on. Make sure that they're marketing that property correctly. Have a look at the descriptions. Have they got internal photos? If they haven't, move on to another agent. And we'll talk a little bit more about agents in a while. Applicant matching. Any good agent will be able to applicant match for you. Does everybody know what this means, applicant matching? Applicant matching is, say, for example, I put my property on with you. You will put all my details on your system as an agent, saying this is my property, these are the photographs, this is the description. Now, if I was to ring you as a tenant, you would put those tenant details on as well. And it makes sense that the computer system will say, here we have a 3-bed semi, and here we have a tenant looking for a 3-bed semi. Let's put the two together. That's called applicant matching. Nearly every agent worth their salt will have this facility. Now, there's a bit of a flaw here. If you were to ring 10 agents and ask them to register you as a tenant, just say, look, I'm looking for property, what have you got? 9 of them won't take your details down. Why is that? Because if you've got properties and you need tenants to do this applicant matching function, then surely it makes sense to take the details down, doesn't it? Would you agree? But they don't. And I don't understand it. But what can you do as a landlord to make sure that you're choosing the right agent? Ring them up. Yeah, ring them up. I'd just do something like this. Just say, hi, Mr. Agent. I said, I'm just looking to rent a property in the local area. Just wondered what you've got 3-bed semis around wherever. And if they go, oh, yeah, just pop in and pick up a list. Thanks, bye. What would you do? Don't ring them again. Go somewhere else. And if you've given them, yeah, that's your property, what should you do? Have a look on Rightmove. Go right on Rightmove the next day. Is your property on Rightmove? Because they've got instant uploading facility. So if your property's not on there the next day, are they doing their job properly? Absolutely not. So test them out. Ring them up, pretend to be a tenant. Have a look on Rightmove the next day. See if your property's on there. If it isn't, give them a roasting from me and say, Sally says. Keeping tenants happy. This is another one. As an agent, we get lots of landlords that don't really like to do maintenance. I don't suppose any of us do really, do we? Because it's spending money. But at the end of the day, how much will it cost you if that tenant moves out? Might take you a month of voids. It might cost you another month's rent in lettings fees. They may even be empty 2 or 3 months. Compared to the cost of a boiler for £500 or £1,000, which is the cheapest option? So when you have maintenance, jump on it and do it straight away. Keeping tenants happy is really, really important. And you know that agent checking thing I just talked to you about? As soon as you put your property on the market with them, check next day, Rightmove and all the rest of it. Do exactly the same with remarketing as well. Quite often we forget that. You know when you get the phone call saying, hi, Mr. So-and-so, your tenant's moving out. Oh, that's great. Put it in your diary. Next day, have a look. See if it's on Rightmove. And if it's not, get on the phone and sort them out. It's very important that you market your property. Each day lost here is a day's rent lost, so you've got to get it marketed as quickly as you possibly can. So voids, manage your voids, do something about it. Paperwork. Oh, this is painful, isn't it? Paperwork. I'll tell you a little story. One of my jobs is acting as mentor and trainer for lettings professionals and larger landlords. And so I get the pleasure of going into lots of places when they've got things to sort out. And it never ceases to amaze me as to how bad some of them are. You know, you sit in your, when you sit in your world and you do your thing, and you just think everybody does everything exactly the same as you, then you go somewhere else and think, oh my Lord, what's going on here? But anyway, there was one place I went into, and I said to him, can I just see 5 of your files? I do this in all my places. I always ask for 5 files. I said, can I see 5 of your files? He says, yeah, no problem. Out comes 5 files. And I always look for a few certain things. Tenancy agreement, inventory, gas certificate, standing order. There should be a ton more, but those are the basics. Out of 5 files, these were client files where clients had paid him to look after these properties for him. These are landlords that had paid him to do this for him. There was 1 signed tenancy agreement out of 5. 1. There was 2 inventories signed. There was 5 properties that had gas, but there was 1 gas certificate. Does anybody know the penalty for not having a gas certificate? 6 months in jail and or £5,000 fine, an unlimited fine if you get sued through the Consumer Protection Act. There was 1 gas certificate. Standing orders? 5. If that was your property, you've paid an agent, you've passed it to an agent, who's liable? You are. You're liable. So when it comes to paperwork, okay, you can do it yourself, but if you pass it on to an agent, what should you do? Check. Get out there. Go and have a look. Go and say, "Hi, Mr. Agent, I'd just like to see my file." When they start breaking out into a hot sweat, it's a bit of a clue that you've got a problem. If you're really nice, you might give them 24 hours notice. But check, it's your paperwork. You cannot abdicate your responsibility to an agent. So many people say to me, "Oh, well, my agent deals with all that. I don't have to worry about it." Do you not have to worry about it? Can you just pass it on to an agent? Because you are still liable. So my word of advice here, when it comes to paperwork, make sure it is done right. See it for yourself. Check, because you are still liable, even if you've passed it on to an agent. Paperwork is really, really important. Just a note, if you go onto my website, sallylawson.co.uk, there's loads of free downloads. It's totally free. And there's one there about different tenancy agreements, because something else I've noticed is that so many people get the wrong type of tenancy agreement. They use non-housing act ones when they should be using ASTs and all the rest of it. And within law, and I'm not going to bore you with it today, but within law, no matter what type of tenancy agreement you use, certain tenants are entitled to certain types of tenancy agreements. So sometimes you may think you've got one type of agreement, you've actually got a different one. So it is so important that you use the right type of agreement, otherwise you may have trouble getting your tenants out. So be very careful. Referencing. Now just think, if you were the landlord of Donna the prostitute, what would you be feeling? They can cost you thousands. Not to mention if you own the whole block, because nobody else would want to live there. So you've got to be very careful. Get the right tenant. And I think over all the years of 5,000 tenants, there's certain things you can do to improve your chances of getting a good tenant. Okay, first of all, when you're looking at referencing, make sure you reference previous landlords. Now, this sounds obvious, doesn't it? But they'll give you mobile numbers, they won't be available, it's not as easy as it seems. But I find that the last landlord, the one that they're living in now, is never really any good. But let's have a think about why that is. Let's imagine you are the landlord of Donna the prostitute. She's the tenant from hell. She's wrecked your place, there's all-night visitors, she's not paying her rent, she's doing your head in. Sorry, it's a Birmingham phrase, isn't it? Doing your head in. Anyway, and this new landlord comes along and says, "Oh, I've just had an application from Donna, and she'd like to come and rent my house, and she's put you down as a reference." What would you say? She's wonderful, isn't she? She's the best tenant you've ever had. You'd have no objection reletting to her again, and she'd never missed a month's payments. Because if you give her a bad reference, she's not going anywhere. So I've just done that, haven't I? So why bother with the last landlord? I mean, yeah, take it with a pinch of salt. But the one way you'll get the real truth is the landlord before the last landlord. That's the one that'll tell you about Donna the prostitute. So you've got to make sure you ring the last landlord. But if you don't get the details of the last 2 or 3 landlords, you haven't got that information. So make sure you go back 3 years of landlords to find out who's who and what's what. Credit report. Now, you can use outside referencing companies if you wish. You can use a letting agent, they'll do it for you. And I've used all sorts. Over the years, as a letting agency, we've used nearly every referencing company out there. And there is a very big varying degree of standards. I'll tell you one. We had this landlord, this tenant applied for a property. We sent it off to a referencing company. You basically send the application form off to this referencing company. I think they charge you about 16, 17, 18 pounds, and you get a report back. And based on having that report, you can be offered rental guarantees. Everybody heard of rental guarantee? Yeah? Okay, good. And this report came back, and it said, voters roll, unable to obtain. Credit search, unable to obtain. Employment reference, unable to obtain. Landlord reference, from overseas, unable to obtain. Guess what it said at the bottom? Pass. And obviously, owner of the business, it was my policy that my staff had to get a pass before they allowed them to move in. That's a reasonable policy, isn't it? And do you remember what I just told you about abdicating your responsibility to a letting agent by saying, oh, it's all right, they take care of that? In the same way, I was abdicating my responsibility for referencing to a referencing company, wasn't I? I was doing the same thing. Well, anyway, this tenant moved in, cut a long story short, because we didn't notice till much later, and the landlord then sued me because I had not obtained correct references. Do you think he had a case? Of course he had. In my contract with my landlord, it said that I would obtain references. Had I obtained references? No, I'd not done my job. So he won. It cost me £3,000. So do I use referencing companies now? No, we do our own referencing. So what we do is we use a credit report, because I think that's very useful, like voters roll and credit search and things like that. And we use a company, write this down, called Credit Safe. I promote those because they're really good, and they charge something like £2.50, £3 a go. You can get it for a lot cheaper than that if you buy on bulk. It depends on how much you use. But Credit Safe, really, really good. They'll give you all the information that you need. They'll give you all the alias addresses, so if they've been living somewhere they've not told you about, you can check that as well. Really, really good. And then we just do our own last 3 landlords, last 3 employers, all that sort of thing. So we do our own references. And we've had a lot less problems since then. We've certainly had no Donna the prostitute since then, so it's been quite good. 3 years of employment. One thing we did have a few years ago was, it was quite a few years ago actually, thinking about it, was a lady that actually said she was an accountant. And she came with all the references, all the previous 3 landlords were fine, and we had the employment references. Everything came back fine, no problem, she moved in. Well, after a very short period of time, we started to get a few complaints from the neighbours. This lady was actually a lap dancer, which is not a problem, but she used to like bringing some of her clients home with her, which is not good. Anyway, we looked back at it, and we said, well, how could this be? We've done everything properly. We've gone through the referencing. But we looked at her employer's reference, and it was actually a mobile number had been used. So one of our staff had used accepted a mobile number. When we phoned this mobile number, she answered it as something like lap dancing agency. And I thought, oh, God. So she got around it that way. So if you want to learn from our mistakes, do not use mobile numbers for employers. Make sure you get a landline. And never accept this, I've got my pre-written employer's reference. You know when they come to you with a letter already written out? Ask yourself this question. Could any of you get a letterhead from work? Could you take it home and write yourself a letter? Could you squiggle on the bottom of it? So why the hell do people take them? I don't get it. Don't take them. Make sure you ring landline number, check the company out, see if it exists, get the reference that way. They're the only way they stack up. National insurance numbers. Make sure you write that one down. These are so useful when you're chasing bad debts. You know when the tenants have done a runner and you want to get the money out of them, it's not lost. You can still get that money back. And there's certain things you can do, like attachment to earnings and all these different bits and bobs. And if you've got a national insurance number, it makes life a lot easier, so be very careful of that. But my favourite 2 are the top and bottom one. Top one is guarantor. If you've got a tenant that is slightly on the edge, as in not been living, if you've got a couple, young couple, not been living together for 12 months, we insist on a guarantor. Because what do young couples that start living together tend to do? They fall out, don't they? You know, one goes one way, one goes the other, and it's not their fault, it's your fault. If you've got a guarantor, you can phone Auntie Flo, who's acting as a guarantor, and say, hey, they've left, you're responsible. All of a sudden, you'll get your rent. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Guarantor is the best invention ever. I mean, there's some companies that insist on everybody having a guarantor. I don't think that's a good idea, because if you asked me for a guarantor, I'd be quite insulted. But use it in the right places. If someone is slightly low on income, if you're not too sure about it, if they're a bit young, just say, we are going to need a guarantor. It makes your life so much easier. Their mom, their dad, their auntie, or whoever it is that's acting as guarantor will have so much more influence on them than you. Do you think so? If your mom was pounding on your door telling you to pay a bill because they were getting chased, do you think you might pay it? Probably more so than if British Gas sent you a bill. So it's very important. Guarantor is really, really useful. But the other one, next of kin, that's a dream, that one. Next of kin is something that a lot of people don't ask for. But next of kin, you can say, well, you know, we need it in the event of you burning yourself or house on fire or dying or going into hospital. You've got a very legitimate reason for asking it, and it is there for that reason. But it is also there for another reason as well. If they decide to do a runner, who are you going to ring? And Ghostbusters is not the answer. Who are you going to ring? The next of kin. Hi, Auntie Mary. Little Johnny and little Mary, they rented a house off us a couple of years ago, and they've put you down as their point of contact. And unfortunately, they seem to have disappeared, and I'm really worried about them. Could you help me find them? We've got some of their stuff. Do you think they're going to ring you? Of course they are. Because they don't want Auntie Mary to be troubled anymore, Auntie Flo, or whatever her name was, I've forgotten it. But next of kin is an absolute dream. Next of kin and guarantors are the two best things you can do as landlords to prevent yourself from getting bad tenants. And if you do get bad tenants, the best way you can actually sort them out. So write those down and remember those ones. Absolute dream. Number 4, arrears. Isn't this the scary one? Would you agree? Is this the one that when you start out, you think, what if they don't pay? What am I going to do? Would you agree? Yeah? What if they don't pay? What are you going to do? You see, after doing this for 20 years, we've never really had a problem with arrears because we manage it properly. And a well-managed arrears account can be resolved rather quickly. It depends on your area, because the courts run at different speeds. In our area, it's about 3 months, maybe 4, to get somebody out on a well-managed arrears account, which is not hugely painful. It's painful, but it's not hugely painful. However, we spoke to a landlord only, I think it was the Tuesday or Wednesday this week, that had done a let only. He'd managed the property himself. We couldn't believe it. These tenants had been in there for 6 months. And he hadn't even sent a Section 8. He hadn't even started to chase the arrears. Why is that? I don't get it. You've got to be very, very careful with arrears, and I'll go for that in a second, because you can't be too pushy, because if you do, it's classed as harassment. So please never be tempted to bang on the door and Mr. Basher, he's got to stay in the car. Can't use Mr. Basher. You'd be surprised how many people do. But you mustn't use Mr. Basher, it's not allowed. But if you manage it properly, it can be quite easily resolved. It's not that difficult. But anyway, this landlord had left this tenant in there 6 months without doing anything about it. That is absolutely ludicrous, absolutely ridiculous. It should never be done. So there is a process you can follow with regards to arrears, and this is very specific, so you must write this down, okay? Number 1, make sure you've got a guarantor. That makes life so much easier. If you haven't got a guarantor, not a lot you can do about it, but whether you have or you haven't, you still follow this process. Number 1, they've first got into arrears. So you don't need to be pretty nasty here, do you? You have to be quite normal, quite civil, and just say, hello, Mr. Tenant. Hello, Mr. Tenant. We seem to have had a problem with the rent this month. Is there a problem? Isn't that what your bank would do if there was a problem with your bank account? Yeah? Do your bank ring you up and start screaming at you if you go overdrawn? Mine doesn't. They're usually quite polite. And that's what you've got to be, quite polite. You must back it up in writing, though. You must back it up in writing. You have to have an official demand. So you do that. Polite letter, rent hasn't come in, is there a problem? Week 2. They are now 14 days in arrears. So week 1 is 7 days in arrears, week 2 is 14 days in arrears. What you do here is you give them another call and say, hello, Mr. Tenant. We had a conversation last week, and you promised to bring the money in on Wednesday, and we've not had it. What's going wrong? Why have we not had the rent? And you'll get all sorts of excuses. Now, with tenants, you get the most bizarre excuses. Has anybody come across weird excuses? Yeah. My left leg's dropped off, I'm dying of cancer, my mum's in hospital, I've had a car crash, the dog's died, and I don't know quite what to do about it. And your answer to that would be, well, that must be really difficult for you. That must be so awful. I can't imagine what you must be experiencing. However, the rent's still got to be paid. If you get it to me in the next 7 days, be considerate, be understanding. We're all human beings at the end of the day. There's no reason to be nasty to anybody. But you've got a duty to get your rent in. It's your money. They owe you that money. Do you think if you didn't make your car payment, they'd let you off? Would they let you off the mortgage? Of course they wouldn't. It's your money. You've got a right to collect it. And if you've got an agent, they should be doing it for you. So make sure you collect that money. Accept no excuse. You can be apologetic and considerate, but make sure you get that money in. Week 3. We're now 21 days in arrears. The clock is ticking. 21 days in arrears. You can now get a little bit firmer. So then, Mr. Tenant, we've had a phone call on such and such a date, and we've had a phone call on such and such a date, and you've promised me that you'd bring a check-in on such and such a date. We don't appear to have had it. I'm getting really concerned now. What can we do? Oh, well, you know, left leg, dog, mom, hospital, car crash, blah, 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 whatever. Okay. I need an arrangement to pay off you today. Hopefully you'll get one. If you don't, and they say, I just can't pay, or they give you some sort of excuse, you will then say, well, Mr. Tenant, I'm sorry, but you will now be receiving a Section 8 notice office in 7 days if we do not receive payment from you by then. You have 7 days to get this money to us. If we do not receive that payment, Section 8 will be coming out to you. Week 4. They are now legally 2 months in arrears. Now, within the law of the land, when a tenant is 2 months in arrears, you have the right to take them to court and evict them. And the court can't stop you. The tenant can't stop you. Doesn't matter how many kids they've got, how many legs have dropped off, you have a right to take them to court and evict them. So when you get to week 4, you just send them a Section 8 notice. And that just basically says, we're taking you to court. You then fill out the court forms, you send them off, you'll get a court date about 4 to 6 weeks later. You attend court, it's just a little room with a little table and a man sitting there, and you just say they haven't paid the rent, this is the amount of ledgers, you take the forms along with you. Job done. It's not difficult. But if you notice, without all of that, there is no emotion. There's no Mr. Basher. There's no anger. There's no turning up in the middle of the night. Because if you do anything like that, if the tenant feels threatened by you in any way, apart from threatened of court action, you're allowed to do that. But if they feel physically or emotionally threatened by you in any way, they have the right to take you to court for harassment. Now, a few years ago, somebody took a landlord to court for harassment and was awarded £90,000. Is that painful? In our world, I'm sure it's not like that down here, but you just give them the keys to the house. Like down here, you probably give them a gate or something. So don't harass. Heavy fines. Again, free download, sallylawson.co.uk, rent arrears and repossessions made simple. If you want to have that in more detail, it's there for you to download. Okay, maintenance. How to reduce maintenance. Maintenance is one of those things that people say to me at strange events. I mean, I did a speech at the Rotary Club a few years ago, and they're a bit hoity-toity at the Rotary Club. And this gentleman stopped and he says, well, that's all very well, but what do you do about the M word? And I must admit, I just stood there and said, the what? What the hell is the M word? Anyway, I've been educated. The M word means maintenance. And, you know, I've seen many, many great plans fall apart because of the M word. This is because they've not put their portfolio together correctly. What they've done is they've bought properties, but they've not refurbished them right at the beginning. Rob always talks about get a property, do a refurb on it. Absolutely right. When you get a property, do a refurb on it. You don't have to turn it into a palace, but you've got to make sure, number 1, it's safe. Number 2, it's compliant. Number 3, it's clean and tidy. If you do that and you make sure the basics are done, you're halfway there. But check the electrics, check the plumbing, check the windows, check the slabbing in the garden and stuff like that. Because these are the things that are going to go wrong and are going to cost you thousands. You work out your margins. Oh, I'm going to make $2,500 a year. If you have to replace the boiler and you have a leak that comes from the bathroom into the front lounge and you have to replace the ceiling, have you made $2,500 that year? Of course you haven't. The M word can absolutely decimate your profit if you don't get it right. So please, make sure at the beginning when you buy a property, you allow in your purchase costs for any work that needs to be done. Because ultimately you'll end up losing money hand over fist year after year if you don't get it right. So you need to are very aware of the M word. We've had some landlords that have just made losses year after year after year because they've got this horribly wrong. They've bought low-end, very badly maintained properties, give them a wallop of paint, and just spent year after year gradually doing them up, which is a shame. Stitching time saves 9. We all know what that means, don't we? But again, do you remember when we talked earlier about keeping tenants happy? Do you remember that? Yes? Are you all still awake? I sent you to sleep. Okay. One of the biggest gripes of tenants, because we do customer service surveys all the way through our lettings process, at the beginning when we let it, in the middle when we manage it, and at the end when they move out. Funny enough, the ones when they move out are the ones where they're most disgruntled. And do you know why most of them are disgruntled? 8 out of 10 are disgruntled. Because the maintenance wasn't done. Every time, it's the maintenance. It's because the contractor didn't turn up. So keep an eye on your contractors. It's because the landlord wanted to get 4 quotes. It's the middle of winter. It's freezing cold. They have no hot water. They've got a little baby. They've got no heating. And you want to get 4 quotes? Are you mad? Would you want to live in that house? Of course not. And then they wonder why the tenant moves out. You've got to make sure that your tenant is looked after. So maintenance is inextricably linked to tenants' happiness. And if you've got an unhappy tenant, what have you got? You've got someone who moans a lot. Someone who rings you up a lot. Someone who will not be complicit or compliant and will not do nice things for you. When you want to go and show somebody around, they'll be going, sod off, you're not coming in here. They will not work for you and work with you if they're not happy. And what they will do is end up moving out and costing you a fortune in void periods and relet fees. I'm sure you don't want to pay lots of relet fees, do you? No, rather have a tenant in there. Move a tenant in. Occupancy is king every time. Occupancy is king. Okay, agents. How to pick the best. I'm a letting agent. I work with other letting agents. I now work on training and mentoring landlords. But how do you guys know which agent to go to? It's not easy, is it? Only a couple of weeks ago, I was going to a property on behalf of a client of mine, and I was in the area, so he said, can you go and meet the agent and drop the keys off? I went, oh, all right then. So I went up to meet this letting agent. And in my world, I don't get to meet letting agents very often, as you would imagine, out on the road doing appointments. It's just not what I get to do. And I talk about this sort of stuff all the time, about good and bad agents. So I thought, well, we'll give it a go. Might be an experience. But anyway, went into this property, and this was a pre-refurb property. So it's a bit of a hellhole, ex-council estate in Manchester. Doesn't look very nice. And in I walk. And, when you're looking round and there's like dodgy wood panelling, and then there's a cork wall, and the toilet sort of smelling in the corner, and there's wires hanging from the ceiling, that sort of thing. You get the picture? And this guy turns up, and I will use the phrase that I've heard many landlords use before. He seemed a very nice guy. And he started looking round and all the rest of it. And I said, oh, it's pre-refurb, needs some work doing on it. He went, oh, no, I wouldn't worry about that. I says, what do you mean? He says, oh, well, if the tenant doesn't ask for it, just leave it. I says, what, leave it like this? He went, yeah, it'll rent, no problem. They always look like this round here. I thought, oh, I can see why you drive an X5. I was gobsmacked. It had illegal electrical wires hanging from the ceiling. There was no smoke alarms. It was just absolutely hellish, this place. The slabs were sticking up, the lintels were bowing, there was cracks up the walls. The kitchen just looked like somebody would die if they ate anything in there. It was just absolutely awful. You couldn't open the windows, you couldn't open the back door. And I just said, you cannot rent a property out like this. You just absolutely cannot rent a property out like this. And he said, no, it'll be fine. I said, look, you're just holding the keys. That's it. He went, yeah, it's fine. So I let him have the keys and off we went. But have you ever been on a landlord appointment with an agent and thought, oh, he's a really nice guy? You ever thought that? But is that how you choose your agent? Because for most landlords, it is. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if he's a nice guy or not. You are not on a date. You want someone that knows their stuff, can do their job, and will make sure that your property is safe and compliant and will protect your interests. And I don't care if he's the grumpiest, insane individual I've ever met. If he does a good job, he's all right for me. But this guy was definitely a nice guy, quite good looking, nice X5, but absolutely disaster. So how can you pick your best agents? There's lots of different ways. There's an organisation called ALA. the Association of Residential Letting Agents. They are like ABTA for holidays. You've all heard of ABTA? Well, ALA is like the ABTA for letting agents. I've been an ALA agent since 1993, and I can remember my interview to get in. Pretty scary. You know, half-moon glasses, loads of people sitting at a boardroom table looking at you going, "Now then, Miss Lawson." "Okay, I know the answer to that one. Give me 10 minutes. It was very scary. They are pretty strict, and they're the ones to be reckoned with. So if you go to an ALA agent, you know that they will have somebody in that office that is qualified to do the job. You're halfway there. You've also got NAEA. Not quite so confident about NAEA because they're mainly sales, which means they'll be very good at sales, but they should be a little bit better than the most. And you've got RICS, surveyors. They also should be very good. So that's one way that you can look for badges that might help you get a good agent. Secondly, remember I told you about the right move check? That is a brilliant way of checking your agent. Someone can be all legally compliant and know everything, but if they can't get the photographs on the system, what use are they? Is your property going to make you any money without a tenant? No, not going to get anything. So do those right move checks. Phone up and pretend to be a tenant. Be a mystery customer. They've got to pass the right move check. They've got to pass the tenant check. They've got to log you on as a tenant. They've got to get your properties on the system. 2 very easy checks to find out which agent to go to. Has anybody ever referenced their agent, just out of curiosity? Anybody? Checked references? One there? One person. It amazes me that we spend so much time thinking, I've got to reference my tenant. We do, don't we? We've got to reference the tenant. What if the tenant's bad? What if the tenant doesn't pay? What if they're the tenant from hell? What if it's Donna? Scary Mary. But what about if your agent is the agent from hell? What if that really nice guy is the one with the 5 files that's got no gas certificates in it? What if he doesn't bother signing the tenancy agreements? What are you going to do then? Because you might be giving him 3, 4, 5, 6 properties. You might have lovely tenants in your properties. But what if one of them dies? So it is so important that you check your agent. You can ask me anytime you like for as many references as you want. You can walk in my office now and I will show you all of my files. You can have a look at them anytime. Your agent should be that confident. Say to them, are you prepared to let me come and see some of your files? You want to see them organised, structured, and make sure everything's in there. Are you prepared to give me 3 references? If the answer is no, move on. So it's right move check, tenant check. Do they have ALA, NAA, or RICS? Thirdly, will they give you 3 references? Make sure you do that. And when you do start letting through them, please don't forget the file check. Get in there and just say, can I have a look at my files, please? You might be surprised what you find. Okay. Number 7. Remember, this is 7 key steps to managing your property portfolio. Number 7. You know, when we start getting into property, did you all think I wanted passive income? Yeah? That's why we do it, isn't it? And it absolutely can be done. I've got properties all over the world. I've got properties that I live in, properties that I rent out, holiday lets, you name it. Passive income. And it is. I don't think about it. I sometimes get a phone call if there's a major piece of work, but other than that, I don't have anything to do with it, so it can be done. But it can only be done if you set it up right in the first place and manage it right. And you need a system for that. And these steps here are the system for that. Number 1, research and buy the right property in the first place. Don't be the builder. Don't buy it to sell it. Buy it to make sure you've got an end game. Make sure you know how you're going to let that property out. And it might be what agent you're going to use, but make sure you know that you can rent that property out. Number 2, the paperwork. When something goes wrong, the first thing you will do is look to your paperwork. When we had a fire in one of our houses 2 years ago, guess what we went to have a look for first? Insurance, gas certificate, and electrical certificate. It's your paperwork that will save you when there is a fire to put out. It will save you when there is a problem. It will stop your tenant moving out or help you to get your tenant out. So make sure your paperwork is right. Reference your tenant properly. Make sure you've got somebody decent in there and not a Donna. It's just not worth it. Or a lap dancer. Not that there's anything against lap dancers, all right, until they've been the client's home. That's not so good. Thirdly, jump on your arrears. Do not take excuses. I know we're all human, and I know we think, oh, but I feel so sorry for them. Don't. They've taken on that property. They've got to pay that rent. If they don't pay their rent, you can't pay your mortgage. They're going to get evicted anyway. So chase them. Jump on them quickly and effectively. Get those notices served. Get those court papers sorted. Number 6, get your refurbs done. Make sure your property is safe, compliant, and you've found all those bits and bobs that are going to go wrong to stop you suffering the pain of the M word. And lastly, choose your agent carefully. More pain can be caused by a bad agent than by a bad tenant any day of the week. Trust me on this one. They can cause you a lot more pain because you won't even know that you're not compliant. You won't even know that you could potentially be walking into a litigation case. So choose your agent carefully. If you do all of those things, you are 90% of the way towards having that passive income stream and lifestyle that you want. So that's it from me. My name is Sally Lawson. If you go on my website, there's lots of downloads on there as to things that you can download regarding the things that we've been speaking about. And I hope you found that useful. Thank you very much.
Sally Lawson. Thank you, Sally.